Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Harry Sandler. I'm the Music Museum of New England's first of many webinars. Before we get started, like to mention just a couple of things. Who we are, we're obviously here trying to preserve the culture and music of New England's music, which goes back a long, long way. I'd like to thank all the writers that have contributed to us over these last 11 years that we've been around. All the contributors, the angels that have helped fund us. My God, without them, we would not be anywhere. I want you to get a pen handy, because at the end of the webinar, there will be information on how to purchase Ted Myers' book, and you will want to purchase Ted Myers' book. It's excellent. I'm hoping that you will all go to Facebook and like MM1, because if you like MM1, we can let you know in the future about what we're doing, and you can be a participant in other webinars. So, and don't forget, there is on the right side of your screen there, a place for you to ask questions to Ted, so that Ted can hopefully answer them. Try not to stump him. He's you know, we don't want to do that. In any event, I would like to bring on right now my friend and author, Ted Myers, the author of Making It, Music, Sex, and Drugs in the Golden Age of Rock and Roll. Hey, Ted, how are you?
Hey, Harry.
So good to have you here. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
I suppose the first thing I'm really interested in is about, it's a three-part question about memoirs. I mean, what makes somebody, what's the difference between a memoir and an autobiography? Why does somebody want to write a memoir? And what's the process you go through to do that?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I didn't know that. I didn't know until I studied memoir writing at UCLA Extension that the difference is an autobiography is basically everything in a person's life from beginning to end. I was born on September 8th, et cetera, et cetera. A memoir is a focused section of somebody's life, and it's called a constraint. And in the case of this book, the constraint is music, sex, and drugs.
Nice, you got my attention.
So there you go. I mean, that essentially that's the definition.
Got it. So what made you want to become a musician?
Well, it was sort of a 50-50 split between my love and admiration for certain rock and roll idols of the 50s, especially the guys that could sing and play guitar and write songs. Buddy Holly comes to mind, probably my favorite. Richie Valens was another. And the second was to, yes, be popular. I was anxious to attract the attention of the opposite sex, and I wasn't very big, tall, handsome, athletic, or anything. So I figured I needed some kind of crush. And be honest, Harry. I'll bet you would have to admit yourself that as a rock and roll musician, you got into it to attract women. Come on, admit it.
This is all about you, Ted, not about me. When you interview me, you can ask me that question, and I'll turn your hair whiter. So that's an honest answer. I mean, was it successful? Did you find that it really drew the gals to you?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, it did.
Excellent.
Even starting with summer camp, you know, when I would take my little nylon string acoustic guitar to the campfires and we would sing Kumbaya and stuff, you know. I knew all the chords to that, all three of them.
The folk songs of the 50s and 60s that were so famous. So what was your first experience performing on stage?
It was in junior high school. It was 1958. I believe I was 13 years old. At that point, I had gotten my first guitar, a few months earlier, and I bugged my parents to get me an electric guitar, which is really what I wanted. And, you know, I was learning the songs off the radio and stuff. And the most talented kid in the school, the best musician, the most talented person, was a blind Puerto Rican kid named Jose Feliciano. And who, of course, you all know, went on to fame and fortune. And Jose, when I told him I had an electric guitar, Jose asked me to bring it to school and we could jam on stage if I let him play my electric guitar.
What kind of an electric guitar was it that was
it
your
was
first guitar?
It was a Supro solid body, gray sunburst. Cheap, but cool.
Cost about $22 then. You could probably buy it on eBay for how much now?
You could name your price now if you could find one. It was, you know, 1958 guitar. What the hell?
Right. So that's high school, yes?
No, junior high. So high. I brought the guitar in, and Jose said if he let me play his. If I let him play my electric guitar for the big school talent show, I could back him up on acoustic guitar and harmonies. So we did that. You know, we performed, and it was in front of, you know, the whole auditorium full of kids, however many it was, 500, 600, I don't know. But it was certainly a sizable audience, considering I had never played in front of an audience. And we did, appropriately enough, La Bamba by Richie Valens. Richie had just died. This was early in 1959. And, you know, Richie Valens had just been killed in a plane crash in February of 59. So he was an idol of both of us. And it went off really well. So, you know, people came back and congratulated us. I'm sorry?
Just the two of you?
Yes.
So you kept on playing through junior high school and into high school. I'm assuming, were you still a solo artist, so to speak, or were you? Did the band world hook you, or were you still into the folk world at that point?
I was split between, again, it was another schizophrenic split. I was split between the jazz world and the folk world. By the time I got to high school, rock and roll was not even cool. I mean, I started high school in 1960. It was a low point for rock and roll, you know. Richie Valens, Buddy Holly were dead. Chuck Berry was in jail. Little Richard was preaching the gospel. Elvis was in the army. There was really nothing in rock and roll to attract us young hipsters. So my attention turned to jazz, which we all considered to be the coolest thing, you know, the coolest of the cool. And I actually took lessons. I took jazz guitar lessons for a while and played with a few jazz combos. I went to high school of music and art, where there were like some incredibly talented jazz musicians, and they very tolerantly let me sit in, although I was really a terrible jazz guitar player. Eventually, I realized that jazz was out of my league and became a folk singer. And I was hanging around Greenwich Village all the time that was walking distance from my parents' house. And so I would get to play in some of the lesser coffee houses in Greenwich Village, where you pass the basket after your set for small change. They were called basket houses. And from about 1961 to 63, I guess, I don't know. Yeah, 63, I think. I went away to college in 63. So yeah, during the rest of the time I was in high school, I was pretty much a denizen of the village, you know, and I rubbed shoulders with a lot of the folk greats, including Bob Dylan, who I met in a
Right.
dark
So you
coffee house.
go off to college, but what was your experience with? You mentioned in your book that you, at one point, you were involved with opening a coffee house. Can you tell me a little bit about that part of your life?
Yeah, that happened at the end of my first year of college, the summer of 1964. Some friends and I, me and my best friend Steve at the time, we cooked up this notion that we were going to go to Martha's Vineyard, which is an island off Massachusetts, which many of you know, and start a folk music coffee house in the model of the basket houses. And we actually got, let's see, Steve and me, 4 other people to sign on. There were 2 other guys and 2 girls. My girlfriend, Jean, who went along as, and her friend Jane, they went along to be waitresses. I know this sounds sexist, but that's the way it was. And that what we were trying to do was absolutely impossible. You know, you can't just go someplace you've never been before and start a coffee house and have it run for just one summer and then go back to college. And I think it was because we didn't realize it was impossible that we succeeded. And just through a succession of incredible lucky breaks. And one of the things that happened, well, 2 exciting things that happened that summer was that I discovered a young 16-year-old James Taylor as he was coming off the ferry boat, and offered him a gig. And he played at our coffee house for the whole summer, on and off. Sometimes with his friend Danny Cooch.
Right. At that point, were people writing songs, or was it all strictly regurgitating the folk music of the era? I mean,
James,
at some point you cross over to become a songwriter, but what at that particular point, what was going on? People just doing other people's songs?
For the most part, it's the latter. I mean, when James auditioned for us, he played Bob Dylan's song, "Don't Think Twice, It's All Right." I don't believe he was writing songs yet at that point. He was 16. I was 18.
How was his voice at that point?
His life?
No, his voice. I mean, his voice
How
is
was
really,
his voice?
yeah, his voice. I mean, his voice has held up over the years. Did he always start out with a great voice, or has it matured over the years, do you think?
I'm sure it's matured over the years. I don't remember exactly how he sounded, but I just remember he was an exceptionally talented 16-year-old. His finger picking was impeccable. His singing was terrific, on pitch, really good. His look was really good. This is about how he looked, you know, when he was 16.
Right. Did anybody else of note play at this coffee house on the Vineyard?
Yes, my old compatriot, Jose Feliciano. We went to, he played the Newport Folk Festival that summer, and we went, my girlfriend and I drove to Rhode Island, and we kidnapped him from the Newport Folk Festival, took him to Martha's Vineyard, which was not far away, and he played there one night before he started his gig at the Mooncusser, which was the big coffee house on Martha's Vineyard at that time.
Did you ever see him again after that? I mean, now you've had 2 interactions with him. Was it ongoing, or was that just a random situation?
I never actually saw him again, but we spoke on the phone. I believe it was when I was working at Rhino Records, and we were doing an album. Don't ask me, I can't remember what it was, but he was participating in it, and it was one of those remote recording things where he was like going to be phoning his parts in, literally,
Really?
And I got him on we did speak on the phone and reminisced about old times. And he had a memory like a steel trap. He could remember the names of our junior high school teachers.
Wow.
So anyway,
that's amazing. So you finish your summer on the vineyard in the folk scene, and you go back to New York. How did you end up here in Boston?
Actually, I went back to college, which was in Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to college. Right. It was called Goddard College. I went to Goddard College in Plainfield, Vermont. And this was an ultra progressive school. It was like, no tests, no grades. You could make up your own courses. It was right down my alley. I majored in girls.
So the theme is starting to develop strongly here. Did you start writing then?
Yes, I did start writing then. And actually, it was in the fall of 1964 that I started my first band. And that was at Goddard. I found 4 other like-minded individuals, and we decided to start a band. Of course, the Beatles were busting out big time at this point, and the Rolling Stones and the Animals. So kind of that was influencing us. In fact, everybody in the folk world at that time was plugging in like mad,
Right.
Dylan and Jesse Colin Young and so many others. And so we started this band in the fall of '64. Now, Goddard had this, it was called The Lost. And it was a motley crew. That's what we looked like. That wasn't the original lineup, but that's what we looked like in '65.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Goddard had this thing called a work term. It was in the middle of the winter when it was too cold to go to school in northern Vermont. And they would send everybody off campus and tell us to go get jobs, preferably jobs that would inform our aspirations in life and later careers. And so the Lost decided to go to Boston and try to get jobs playing music as a rock and roll band. We had already gotten one gig in Burlington, Vermont. We had a steady gig every Saturday night in Vermont. So we got to go to Boston, and we got an apartment, and I think we managed to get one gig during that 2-month period that was from January and February of 1965. And at the end of that time, 2 of our guys, the guitar player and the drummer, decided to go back to school like they were supposed to and continue their studies. The other 3 of us, myself, Walter Powers, and Willie Alexander, I'm in the middle, Walter's on the left, Willie's on the right, just in case you want to know who's who in that picture. We decided to continue. We decided to stay in Boston, drop out of school, and try to make a go of it as a rock band. And so we recruited 2 more members. Took a little while, but we recruited Lee Mason on drums, Kyle Garahan on lead guitar, and proceeded to try to get gigs.
So were you all writing songs, or just you, the primary songwriter?
I was the primary songwriter. I wrote 1 or 2 songs in collaboration with Willie Alexander. Willie wrote 1 or 2 songs on his own. And we all kind of rotated singing lead. so we had like four guys that could sing lead, and all four of us had very different deliveries, very different voices.
So as a songwriter, I'm always curious about songwriting and what somebody uses as a methodology. Lyrics first, music first, all by yourself, everything, collaboration. What was your methodology for writing a song?
God, as close as I can remember, it all kind of, I felt like the songs were just coming through me. It was like it all just come spilling out. I would get a basic concept. I think usually a title, a hook title would come to me, and the next thing would be a melody to go with notes to go with that hook title, and then I would build around that. It would start with a verse and build up to the hook.
Mm-hmm.
That's as close as I can come to describing it. But to a large,
did you guys collaborate then? Or were you a collaborative writer band, or was it pretty much, here's my song, let us do it?
It was mostly me writing by myself. Willie and I collaborated on our first single, which was called Maybe More Than You. And there's a funny story about that in the book, but I won't go into it. Anyway,
You mean the book?
The book. That book.
The book. This book, Making It. Don't forget, you're going to want to write down the address, folks, so you can buy it at the end of the show.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You just earned another $5. Thank you, Harry.
No problem.
So Willie, we got kicked out of a party, okay, because of the way we looked. We had this long hair and, tight pants and beetle boots and crazy looking clothes. And so Willie started scribbling these words down. I couldn't crash your party, so I broke down and I cried. If I tried to hitchhike, you're the type don't give a ride. And I started strumming some folk rock chords, on acoustic guitar. And our first collaborative song was born, and that actually became our first single, and with Willie singing lead.
So I noticed in reading your book, you were together 64, 65, and you got a deal. That's pretty quick. You wrote a lot of songs in that year that got you that deal.
I guess I must have. I did. I was a veritable fount of songs. I mean, it was they were just pouring out of me at that point, and a lot of them were good, some of them not so good. But by August of 1965, we got signed to Capitol Records, which was, in 1965, what did they have? They had the Beach Boys and the Beatles, the two biggest bands in the world.
Right.
So
right.
We were naturally thrilled and excited, and we figured no place to go from here but up. We weren't quite right about that. You went
on tour with them as an opening act, the Beach Boys?
We toured with the Beach Boys in May of 1966. We opened for the Beach Boys, and that was a thrill.
Experience for you?
I'm sorry?
Good experience for you? Large hall filled with screaming people?
Yes, it was mostly colleges. I mean, it's funny because you'd think the Beach Boys would be playing to arenas like the Beatles were, but not so. They were playing medium-sized venues. They're mostly colleges. And we had played a couple of big concerts. The Lost had played a couple of big concerts opening for big acts before. We opened for the Supremes and Sonny and Cher and the Shirelles. There was always something there was always some technical thing that went wrong with every one of our big concerts. But thank God for the Beach Boys tour, we finally got it down, and we were basically at the top of our game at that point, and we acquitted ourselves admirably. We played well, we sang well, and the sound was good. So we were very happy about that. The bad thing about the Beach Boys tour was the fact that even though we had released our first single, Maybe More Than You, in October of 1965, it's now May 66, and we still didn't have a follow-up single. And it's because every song we recorded, Capitol rejected as a single. So, and maybe they were right. I don't know. I wasn't exactly.
And so that becomes, like many bands, the beginning of the end, if you will, because the label doesn't give you the support because they don't hear the singles, the records don't sell, the band becomes disillusioned. Would you say that's sort of the what contributed to the demise of the Lost?
I think that was the main thing. There were a lot of other factors, but the fact that we were touring, we had this big audience that we could play to, and each town that we hit, the radio station would have played our latest single, and there wasn't any.
Right.
And,
so there's a lot I want to cover, for other periods. So at this particular point, the Lost kind of fades away, and you find yourself putting together another band, your second band, which is Chameleon Church. Can you give me a little synopsis of that project for us?
Well, after the demise of the Lost, I moved back to New York City, which was my hometown, and also really the center of the music business at the time, along with Los Angeles. But it was the closest center of the music business, and I felt I needed to be there to get something else going for myself. And I signed a publishing agreement with somebody, and actually, I ran into my friend Ray Perrette, who was the manager of Ultimate Spinach at the time. And Ultimate Spinach was doing really well. Their first album was selling a lot in Boston and everywhere. Everywhere.
The Ultimate Spinach of the Boston Sound fame.
That Ultimate Spinach.
That
and Ray and I were old friends from the time he was in college, and he brought me up to the offices of Alan Lorber, who was the producer of Ultimate Spinach. And so, I took an acoustic guitar and I played him a couple of songs right there live for him in his office. And he offered me a publishing deal on the spot, which gave me a small weekly stipend in advance against royalties. And the promise that if I put together a band, I could record an album with him, and it would come out on MGM Records. So, this was a dream that I had, and to make a full-length album, Capitol didn't let us make a full-length album.
And that band was Chameleon Church, right?
That band was Chameleon Church. I never got to make a full-length album with Capitol because of the fact that we only had sort of 1.5 singles released. It's complicated, but anyway, their rule at the time, Capitol's rule at the time, was if you don't get a single on the charts, you don't get to make an album. And so Lorber guaranteed me an album. And so with this in my hip pocket, I recruited more band members. And the first person was Tony Shuren, who you see in this picture on the left. He was an excellent songwriter, singer, multi-instrumentalist. He was at the time the road manager for Ultimate Spinach. And we sat down and tried to see if we could collaborate on songwriting, and we clicked, So we started writing songs together. And meanwhile, I had met this guy that I had met earlier in life named Chevy Chase. And he was this tall, loquacious individual. It was very, very funny. And had a great personality, great look, and he said he was a great drummer. And and he wanted to be in a band, and he wanted to be in a band with me. And he basically, well, literally, he hounded me for months.
Was he a fan of the Lost, that he knew of your work?
I don't know that he really knew about the Lost, but he knew something about my history. And he was from upstate New York. He was from a town called Annandale-on-Hudson that was really close to Goddard College. I don't know if that's where he came from, but his family lived very close to there. And I met him years earlier when my roommate at Goddard was killed in a motorcycle accident. And I met him at this guy's funeral. And, he said he was a drummer, and I basically filed him away for future reference. And then all of a sudden he popped up in Manhattan, and well, there he was.
So in hindsight, was he a good drummer? You've worked with a lot of musicians. Was he a good drummer for that time and for that band?
I would have preferred somebody that hit the drums a little harder.
Really? Okay. Well,
I'm being diplomatic here,
Yeah, no, I understand. I want to put you on the spot. What the hell?
I know that Chevy was a big jazz fan. He also played piano really well. He was always playing this Bill Evans song on piano, Waltz for Debbie. And I know he's a jazz fan. And we played pretty, Chameleon Church played pretty soft rock. I would have liked it to have been harder, but I was writing these really pretty songs. So the way he played really kind of went with the music. So I have to give him.
Right. So that period kind of drifts away, if you will. The record doesn't do really well, and you decide to break that band up, or that band breaks up. What happens next for you? Where do you go after Chameleon Church?
Well, the album bombed. The entire band, I convinced everybody to move back to Boston. Tony didn't take much convincing. He was from there in the first place. But Chevy and Kyle was the lead guitar player in The Lost, and also in Chameleon Church. Chevy and Kyle were not like wild about the idea of leaving New York. And but Ray Perrette said, if we moved up there to Boston, or the area where he was, he could get us gigs. So we moved up there, and Tony and I moved into a big house where Ray was living with a couple of other people in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And Chevy and Kyle got places elsewhere. I can't remember whether they shared a place, or anyway, they didn't live with us. And so we did about 3 or 4 gigs, live gigs in the Boston area, and discovered that we were really unprepared to play live. All we had done so far was to prepare the album, rehearse the songs for the album, go into the studio, record the album, and we had never played a live gig. And then we lip synced. We were on TV for a minute in New York. We were on an ABC TV special where we lip synced our single that was written by Tony and I. And then we moved to Boston and attempted to play live gigs. And it was a rough start. Part of the problem was that everybody except me played 2 or 3 other instruments. And so on the album, everybody was switching instruments all the time. And then we realized that really didn't work on stage very well. When you have to take the time in between songs to put Tony on bass and Kyle on guitar, or Kyle on bass and Tony on guitar, or Chevy on keyboards and Kyle on drums. It got pretty convoluted. So ultimately, the band got discouraged. Basically, Chevy and Kyle sort of said, "The hell with this." this isn't going anywhere. I'm moving back to New York.
So
they moved
that
back.
band breaks up, and next opportunity comes knocking on your door, which is
Ultimate Spinach. So, yes, them.
Yep.
So Ray Perrette was the manager. Alan Lorber was the producer. Tony and I were still under contract to Alan Lorber for an indefinite amount. I don't remember how long we were supposed to be under contract to him. We owed him at least.
I would imagine Alan still owns your soul, just as an insert.
No, I got an attorney in LA to get me out of that. But
okay. It was just a wild thought. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but I at least owed him another album. So Ultimate Spinach fired their founder and lead singer, and everybody in the band, including Ray, the manager, and Alan, the producer, all sanctioned this. It was like, oh no, that's the wrong word. They all backed up the band and banished the original leader, Ian Bruce Douglas, and sent him packing because he had flipped out. He was just going crazy and saying crazy things and making the people in the band feel horrible. So the logical choice was to draft me and Tony as the new lead singers, and since Tony played keyboards, he could take the place of Ian on keyboards. I played guitar on some songs, but mostly I just sang lead. And Barbara Hudson played rhythm guitar, and Jeff Skunk Baxter played lead guitar. So this was the lineup that I joined in 1968. I think the end of 1968, maybe 69. Anyway.
And so who's left from the original band? Who's in the band besides you and Tony?
Russ Levine, who is the second from the left there, joined Ultimate Spinach after the original drummer left. That was while they were recording their second album, as I recall it. Not sure when Jeff Skunk Baxter was hired. Barbara Hudson, as far as I know, the girl on the right, is the only original member, was the only original member left.
Right. So when you come into this band, Jeff Baxter is playing lead guitar in this band.
Right.
That's interesting. So
and it was clear that he was an extraordinary talent.
So, in order to expedite and move forward, I kind of want to wrap up this section very succinctly. What's the lesson you pull out of these three albums, these three bands that you could have done different? Do you think you could have done anything different because they achieved what levels of success they achieved, and was there any lesson to take out of these three bands in this period of your life?
Yes, of course there was. There were so many things we could have done differently. There were so many luck factors that we had no control over. But for The Lost, let me start with The Lost. The Lost, to me, probably had the best chance of breaking through of any of my bands. Part of the reason for that was that we got in there early. We started in '64. We hit Boston in '65. We became local celebrities. We were like regional rock stars. We were very popular all through New England and upstate New York, and us to have used that as a toehold and branched out and become nationwide. I blame Capitol a little bit because there was no second single. By the time the second single came out, it was too late. How
about as musicians, young musicians at that time? Tough question. Do you think you took direction well from management or the label, or because a lot of artists, it's difficult having them take direction?
I think it was the opposite. I think I was so intimidated by the record company, and we didn't really have management. I mean, with the Lost, there really wasn't competent management, and that was a second reason for our failure to succeed. We had a great agent, Fred Taylor. He got us a lot of gigs, but he wasn't an experienced manager, and he didn't have the kinds of connections that we needed to have. And the other thing was, people from Capitol kept whispering in my ear, saying, "Oh, you ought to do this, you ought to do that," and I was just too eager to please them, to do what they thought was best, and against my own instincts.
Right.
And
right. So do you think that young artists should just turn everything over to people, or they should trust their own instincts? And what instinct does a young artist have at that point in their life?
I think we're jumping ahead to my advice to young artists, but nonetheless, I think that you really ought to think twice before you just take the advice of anybody in authority. Just because these guys are business people and they're somebody in the business, it doesn't mean they know anything about music. And really, nobody knows what's going to be a hit and what's not going to be a hit. I think artists should follow their instincts. If you're a songwriter, you know what's good, you know your best work, and you know how it should be presented. And I would discourage young artists from just following the advice of anybody that's an authority figure.
Well, I think we could probably do a whole hour just on that point alone, because I wonder, instincts are how attuned are they as a young artist? You must have been 23 or 24 at that time, and I mean, at 23 or 24, just how attuned are your instincts and how much experience? Like I said, there's too many questions and not enough time here. I would like to ask you a question that somebody from the audience has sent in to us, and it goes back and it references, it really references Chevy Chase, but it's an interesting question, I think. At what point, Jeffrey Lane, one of our viewers, has asked, at what point did Chevy go on tour posing as Orpheus? He mentioned it in an interview that he did for an organization called Super Deluxe. Are you aware of any of that part of Chevy's world? Orpheus being a Boston band at the time.
I am now, because Kyle told me that he and Chevy were both in that counterfeit Orpheus.
And so that was immediately after. That was after.
I don't know how long. I'm not sure exactly at what point this happened. I would assume it was pretty close to right after they moved back to New York City after the Chameleon Church. And of course, they were still in the clutches of Alan Lorber. They were probably still under contract to him even. And Lorber, I think, launched this tour. He put together this tour of this phony Orpheus. Harry, you should know more about that than me. I didn't know anything about it.
So we really only have a limited amount of time, and there's really so much to cover here in this book. I kind of want to kind of break a little bit here in a way. I had written down a series of questions because I read the book, but there's a tremendous amount. It's quite a fascinating story of you're traveling through entertainment over many years. I mean, is there one period that jumps out at you? I mean, did you make any other records? Well, I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask you, did you make any other records after Lost, Chameleon Church, and The Ultimate Spinach that we know about?
No, not that you know about, but yes.
All right. So tell me about this. This is just a sort of a surprise question. So this is an album that I've had in my albums for a long, long time, and I thought that the audience would really get they would love this picture of you in the front there.
Oh my God.
I think you all can see this. Can you just give me a 15-second recap of this experience in the recording world? Glider.
So you've been shopping in the 99-cent bins, I see.
No, it's down to 25-cent yard sale.
Yeah.
Don't flatter yourself. Anyway.
Sorry. So it took me from 1969 to 1977 to get another album deal. And I signed with an independent production company that had a deal with United Artists Records. And so we got to do an album. No expense was spared. We recorded in every deluxe studio in LA. I didn't have a band at the time. I had one guy, and basically they made me fire him and hire a whole new crew that were studio musicians, basically. And so Glider was, in fact, another counterfeit band. It was really it was a solo record by me.
But you didn't want to. They didn't want to put it as a 10.
I wanted it to be a band.
A band. I got it. Okay. So go ahead.
My master plan was, once the album came out and was, successful, that I would be able to easily recruit a band to go on the road. But it didn't work out that way at all. The record company killed the album. It was dead on arrival. There was like a feud going on between the record company and the production company.
So I'm going to ask you a question that is definitely a 10-minute answer, and ask you to answer it very succinctly in 45 to 60 seconds. Tell me your Steely Dan story.
Yeah, okay. So I'm walking through this. It's 1972. I'm walking through a dark supermarket parking lot, and the door of a VW van slides open, and an arm comes out holding a Gibson Melody Maker guitar. And a voice says, "Psst, want to buy a guitar? $15. So I didn't hesitate. I took the guitar, gave the guy $15. And when I got it home, I realized that the neck had been broken and reset badly. So I needed to take it to a repair place. So I took it to the best guitar repair place in LA, which was Valley Sound. And who should be behind the counter but Jeff Skunk Baxter when I took it in. So Skunk and I had this reunion, and wait, not yet. Okay. So, and then, so he said, so anyway, they fixed the guitar, they made it perfect. But he said, he was forming this band with these studio guys from ABC Dunhill. And he called me soon afterwards and asked if I would be interested in auditioning for them as lead singer, because this guy, Don Fagan, who wrote all the songs, was insecure about his voice. So that what they wanted was a front man and lead singer. But all the songs were going to be written by Fagan and Becker. And I was a songwriter, I was like primarily a songwriter. I wasn't that great a singer in my own opinion. So I went over to Skunk's apartment, and he played me this one song they had on tape, which was called Bye Bye Dallas. And it featured Skunk on pedal steel guitar, which is probably why that's what he played for me, because that was his passion at that time, pedal steel. So, I heard it and I said, well, gee, it sounds kind of country-ish to me. I really don't think I'd be right for this band. So I actually turned down the gig, okay. which actually turned out to be lucky, because the guy that they hired, David Palmer, lasted for one album, and then he was gone. And then Fagan took over as lead singer. So there you have it.
Got it. So in your book, you tend to make a lot of mention of the sexual activities of the 60s. It's actually, given that it's making in music sex and drugs, I don't need to talk about the drug portion, but I'm very interested in the sex portion, given the fact that you also became somewhat of an acolyte. Is that the correct word, of Swami Satchidananda?
Satchidananda. Well, I don't believe I was ever a follower of anybody. He was the closest thing to the real article I'd ever seen. I know the Beatles had the Maharishi. This guy was more for real than the Maharishi was.
Do you still follow that line of thought process for,
Yes.
spiritually?
Yes, I do. I was into. He got me into meditation and yoga, chanting, and the whole philosophy of the Eastern religions, both Hinduism and Buddhism. And although, I was married at the time to a girl named Eva, and we went to his gatherings pretty regularly, but I wouldn't say I was an acolyte or a follower, although he did give me my personal mantra, which I have kept to this day and which I say every day. I repeat that every day. It's also a secret. Not supposed to share it with anyone.
That there was a conflict between the search for the higher consciousness and the active 60s sexual scene that was going on?
No, not at all. I didn't see a conflict in my own mind at all. Although, I mean, I may have been guilty of some moral breaches. Most of the time, I had a lot of lovers. I was with a lot of women, and some I was really in love with, and some they were passing fancies, but there was real love exchanged between us. And in the 60s, it was all about love, and hell, I was all about love. It wasn't. I don't believe that the Eastern religions are as morally dogmatic as, say, Christianity or Judaism.
Right. So abstinence was not a question at that point. It was the search for the seekers of higher consciousness, and sex was a part of that.
Well, I didn't expect to. I wasn't trying to be Satchidananda. I wasn't trying to be the Buddha. I was just following in their footsteps and aspiring to evolve as much as I could in this lifetime.
So we have about several minutes left before we're done with our webinar tonight. I guess my last question to you is, what advice do you have for young artists today that is really that will help them maybe avoid the pitfalls? A little more than what you said before about follow your intuition. Is that basically the only thing you have to pass along to young artists that are probably watching this webinar?
No, there's more.
Well, do tell, my friend, do tell.
Well, let me start by saying I'm not in the music business anymore. I'm not in touch with the present music business. I know that it's a DIY business, and I was pitifully unaware of that way up until the later part of my career in the 80s, where I still expected to have managers and record companies step in and take care of all the business stuff for me. I felt like my only job was to be the creator, and then that's it. The rest of it's not my job. But people were not beating down my door, and I think most young artists today realize that everything is their job. If you're gonna start down that road, the first thing is you need to love it. You have to do it because you love it, and for no other reason. You have to do it because you have to do it. You can't be expecting any kind of instant gratification or even long-range gratification. You don't do it for the money. You don't do it for the glory. You do it because you love the music. And secondly, never say, not my job. Everything's your job until the rest of the music world gets the memo and tries to hitch their wagon to you. Lastly, I would say keep your bullshit antenna fully extended and make sure that, obviously once you've been burned once or twice by liars and flim-flam artists, of which there are many in the music business, you'll learn to sense when someone is on the level and when they're not.
That's good advice. That's really good advice. So I guess I kind of stepped up a little fast here. There is another question, but I'd like you to kind of tell us something that you'd like to leave us with. Is there a part of your career? I mean, we didn't cover nearly everything that's in this book. There's chapters about your interaction with dozens of celebrities, from Joni Mitchell to Graham Nash, that period when they lived in their house, which was a very, very nice house, I understand, with 2 cats in the yard. But is there anything else that you would like to leave the audience with, other than the advice that you just left them with? Any other parts or story? One last nasty story that might turn everybody's hair white?
Okay, well, of course, the book is dotted with celebrity encounters. Even from the time I was in elementary school, when I was 10 years old, I had this mad crush on this girl named Janie Schindelheim. She grew up, married Jan Wenner, and started Rolling Stone magazine. Junior high, Jose Feliciano. High school, I went to high school with, among many other people that became celebrities, Peter Wolf, who was lead singer of the Jay Giles Band, as you all know. I think one of the funniest, juiciest stories was about Robert Palmer. I used to hang around at the Rainbow, a place in Hollywood called the Rainbow, and they'd kick everybody out at 2:00 in the morning, and then everybody would mill around in the parking lot, trying to either score drugs or score sex or both. And I was chatting up this really pretty young thing, and this guy and his girlfriend or wife inserted himself into our conversation. So he made it known that he was island recording artist Robert Palmer. And did we know any after hours places where there was dancing? So, and the girl I was talking to said, yeah, I want to go dancing. So I said, well, yeah, there is this place, it's down on Beverly Boulevard called the Odyssey. So he said, can we go there? It was British. He was very, very properly dressed and, quite the gent. And, he got into my car. He and his wife, I found out it was his wife, they got into the back. Me and the girl I was with were in the front. And the windows were all fogged up from all the people in the car and the weather outside. So I started the windshield wipers going, and I said, bloody fog. And he started laughing, and he said, bloody? Is that the way you talk? He said, for sure, dude, I'm going surfing. And so he was mocking me, and as he was mocking me, everybody else was laughing. And I was like turning every shade of red and purple, and like right then and there, I developed an everlasting hatred for this guy. But that wasn't the worst of it. By the time I drove them down to this club, I was looking for a place to park. They all got out of the car, including the girl I was with. And when I went into the club, they were all gone. He had absconded with the girl as well.
The story that many musician
so the ignominy of it all.
So we have arrived at that point in our hour where I have to thank you for spending the hour with us, answering all these questions that I've had from reading your book. I'd like everybody to make sure they copy down the address where you can get this book. And I'd like to thank you personally for being a part of tonight's webinar. So thank you.
Thank you, Harry. It was so much fun.
Absolutely. And as for everybody else, I would like to thank personally Carl Tortola, our director. Without this this man, tonight would not have lasted or come together the way that it has. I'd like to thank his wife for letting him go from paying attention to the two kids for the last 5 months while we've been preparing this. And everybody else, Wayne Uleki for all of his wonderful graphics, and for our lighting designer, Shirley, and for everybody that has supported us over these last 11 years. Please keep supporting us. We're going to keep on putting stuff up. We're going to keep on preserving the great heritage of New England music. So thanks so much, everybody. Be safe out there, all you ships at sea. Be careful, and thanks for tuning in tonight. Take care.